The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in spring, 1873, and Willa Langford knew, without opening it, that her father had finally done what he had threatened to do for months: sold her like livestock to the highest bidder. She stood in the cramped kitchen of their Philadelphia boarding house, her fingers trembling as she broke the wax seal and read the words that would change her life forever. A man named Victor Kane in Concordia, Kansas, had paid $200 for a bride, and the train ticket enclosed would take her west in 3 days. Her father stumbled in from the back room, reeking of whiskey even at this early hour, his bloodshot eyes taking in the letter in her hands. "Well, girl, you read it then." Willa turned to face the man who had once been a respectable merchant before her mother died, before gambling and drink had consumed him entirely. "You actually did it. You sold your own daughter." "Do not take that tone with me," he said, pointing a shaking finger in her direction. "I gave you a roof over your head for 20 years, time you earned your keep. That cowboy paid good money, and God knows we need it. The landlord is threatening to throw us out, and my debts—" He stopped, as if realizing he had said too much. "Your debts," Willa repeated, her voice hollow. "This is about your gambling debts." He had the decency to look away. "You will go to Kansas. You will marry this man, and maybe, just maybe, you will have a better life than what I can give you here." She wanted to scream, to throw the letter in his face, to run, but where would she go? She had no money of her own, no relatives who would take her in, no skills that would earn her enough to survive in a city like Philadelphia. At least in Kansas, she might have a chance at some kind of future, even if it was with a stranger who thought he could purchase a woman like a horse or a piece of land. The next 3 days passed in a blur. She packed her few belongings into a worn carpet bag: 2 dresses, her mother's Bible, a photograph of her parents taken before everything fell apart, and the small wooden horse her father had carved for her when she was 6, back when he still smiled. Her father did not speak to her much during those final days, and she was grateful for the silence. What was there left to say? On the morning of her departure, he pressed $10 into her hand at the train station. "For emergencies," he muttered, not meeting her eyes. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd without looking back. Willa stood on the platform with her bag at her feet, watching his retreating form, and realized she felt nothing. The grief had burned out weeks ago, leaving only ash. The train journey west was long and uncomfortable. She shared her compartment with a preacher's wife and her 3 noisy children, a salesman who smelled of cigars, and an older woman who knitted constantly and never spoke. Willa pressed her forehead against the window and watched the landscape change from the familiar streets of Philadelphia to farmland, then to endless prairie that stretched to the horizon. She had never seen so much sky. At night, lying on the hard bench with her bag as a pillow, she tried to imagine what Victor Kane would be like. Was he old, cruel? Would he expect her to fall into his arms with gratitude for rescuing her from poverty? The letter had said nothing about him except his name, and that he owned a ranch outside Concordia. She knew Kansas was cattle country, that it had only been a state for 12 years, that it was still wild and dangerous in ways that Philadelphia had never been. She tried not to think about all the things that could go wrong. The train pulled into Concordia on a bright afternoon, 6 days after leaving Philadelphia. Willa stepped onto the platform with her carpet bag, her legs unsteady after so many days of travel, and looked around at the dusty town that would be her new home. It was smaller than she had expected: a main street lined with wooden buildings, horses tied to hitching posts, a few wagons rolling past. In the distance, she could see the endless prairie stretching away, golden grass waving in the wind. "Miss Langford." She turned to find a man standing a few feet away, hat in his hands. He was tall, probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of summer storms. He wore dusty work clothes and scuffed boots, and there was a carefulness in the way he held himself, as if he was not quite sure what to do with his hands. "Yes," she said, straightening her shoulders. "Are you Victor Kane?" "I am." He took a step closer, his eyes searching her face. "Your journey was all right. It was long." She did not know what else to say. Was she supposed to thank him for buying her? The thought made her stomach turn. He seemed to sense her discomfort. "I have a wagon. The ranch is about an hour outside town. If you need anything before we go supplies, food, we can stop. I just want to get this over with." The words came out harsher than she intended, and she saw him flinch. "All right then." He reached for her bag, but she held on to it. "I can carry my own things." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, maybe, or respect. He nodded and led the way to a wagon hitched to two sturdy horses. He helped her up onto the seat, his hands gentle on her arm, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. They rode in silence for the first few miles, the town falling away behind them. Willa had never been anywhere so open, so empty. The prairie rolled on forever, dotted with occasional stands of trees along creek beds. Hawks circled overhead, and the wind carried the smell of grass and earth and distance. "Your father did not tell you much about me, I take it," Victor finally said, his voice careful. "My father told me you paid $200 and that I was to marry you. That is all I needed to know, apparently." He was quiet for a long moment. "I am sorry." She turned to look at him, startled. "What? I am sorry." He kept his eyes on the road ahead. "When I sent that letter to the matrimonial agency, I thought I was helping someone. I thought maybe there was a woman back east who wanted a fresh start, who wanted land and opportunity. I did not realize men like your father might use it as a way to." He stopped, his jaw tightening. "I am sorry. If I had known, I never would have what? Not sent for a mail-order bride at all." Willa heard the bitterness in her own voice. "Or just made sure she came willingly." "Yes," he said simply. "Both of those things." She did not know what to make of him. She had prepared herself for someone cruel or indifferent, not this quiet man who apologized and looked genuinely troubled. It made everything more complicated. "Why did you send for a bride at all?" she asked. "Could you not find someone here?" A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, though it did not reach his eyes. "Concordia is not exactly overflowing with unmarried women. The few who are here have their pick of men, and I am not much of a catch. I have a ranch, but it is small. I work from dawn to dusk most days. I am not charming or well-spoken, and I do not dance." Despite herself, Willa felt her lips twitch. "You seem to be speaking just fine now." "That is because I have been rehearsing what to say to you for 3 weeks." He glanced at her, and this time the smile reached his eyes. "I had a whole speech prepared, actually, about how I would do my best to be a good husband, and how I hoped we could build a partnership, and how you would have your own space and your own choices. But now it just seems inadequate." She offered. "I was going to say stupid, but that works too." They fell silent again, but this time it felt less strained. Willa studied his profile, the straight nose, the firm jaw shadowed with stubble, the small scar above his left eyebrow. He looked like someone who worked hard, who spent his days in the sun and wind. His hands on the reins were scarred and calloused, but she remembered how gently he had touched her arm when helping her into the wagon. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. He took a breath. "We get to the ranch. I show you around. There is a bedroom, you can have it. I will sleep in the barn until we figure things out. Figure things out, whether you want to stay." He turned to look at her directly now, those storm-colored eyes serious. "You belong to no one now, Willa, not to your father and not to me. I paid for your passage here, yes, but that does not give me ownership of you. If you want to leave, I will give you money for a ticket anywhere you want to go. If you want to stay but not marry me, you can stay and we will figure out some other arrangement. And if you want to try being married not right away, but when you are ready, then we can try that too." She stared at him, her heart pounding. "You cannot mean that." "I do mean it." "Then why did you pay $200 for a bride if you were just going to let her leave?" "Because maybe she will want to stay," he said softly. "Not because she has to, but because she chooses to. And if she does not, well, then at least I helped her get away from whatever she was running from." Willa felt something crack open inside her chest, something that had been frozen solid since the day she read her father's letter. "I do not understand you." "That makes two of us," Victor said, turning back to the road. "I have been told I do not make much sense." The ranch came into view as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. It was modest, a wooden house with a front porch, a barn, a chicken coop, a fenced pasture where a dozen cattle grazed. Beyond it, the prairie stretched away in all directions, turning gold and amber in the slanting light. It was beautiful in a way that made Willa's throat tight. Victor helped her down from the wagon and carried her bag to the house despite her protests. Inside, everything was tidy but spare. The main room had a stone fireplace, a table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair in the corner. The kitchen was small but well organized. He led her down a short hallway to a bedroom with a window overlooking the pasture. "This was my parents' room," he said, setting her bag on the bed. "They started this ranch 20 years ago. My father died in a riding accident when I was 16, and my mother passed 2 years ago from fever. It is yours now if you want it." Willa ran her hand over the faded quilt on the bed. "Where will you sleep?" "There is a cot in the barn. It is comfortable enough." He moved toward the door, then paused. "There is food in the kitchen, bread, dried meat, some preserves. Help yourself to whatever you need. And if you want to be alone, I understand. I have evening chores to do anyway." After he left, Willa sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process everything that had happened. She had expected many things when she arrived in Kansas: a rough man demanding his purchased bride, a hasty marriage, a future of servitude and obligation. She had not expected Victor Kane with his quiet voice and his astonishing declaration. "You belong to no one now." She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 dresses on pegs on the wall and placing her mother's Bible on the small table beside the bed. The photograph of her parents she set on the windowsill, though looking at her father's younger, happier face made her feel strange inside, angry and sad and lost all at once. That night, she made them both dinner from the supplies in the kitchen: beans and cornbread and coffee. She called Victor in from the barn when it was ready, and they ate together at the small table, not talking much but not uncomfortable either. He complimented her cooking, and she noticed he had washed his face and hands before coming in, that he minded his manners and did not talk with his mouth full. "Tell me about the ranch," she said, breaking the silence. "What do you do here?" He looked surprised that she had asked. "Cattle, mostly. I have about 40 head right now, hoping to build the herd up over the next few years. Some chickens for eggs. I grow a little wheat and corn for feed. It is not much, but it is honest work." "You do it all yourself?" "I have a ranch hand who comes 3 days a week, a man named Samuel Potter. He is 60 years old and has been working cattle since before Kansas was even a state. He has taught me most of what I know." Victor took a sip of his coffee. "The work is hard, but I like it. I like being outside, like working with the animals. And there is something about this land," he gestured toward the window, where the last light was fading from the sky. "It gets into your blood." Willa found herself wanting to understand what he meant. "Did you grow up here? Born in that bedroom you are sleeping in?" he said with a small smile. My parents came from Ohio right after they got married. My father wanted to build something of his own, and my mother was brave enough to follow him. They had a hard first few years: drought, grasshoppers, cattle dying, but they stuck with it. By the time I was 10, the ranch was starting to really work. And then your father died. His expression grew distant. He was breaking a new horse. It threw him, and he hit his head on a rock. He was gone before I could even get him back to the house. I was 16 and suddenly responsible for everything: the ranch, the animals, my mother. I grew up fast. I am sorry, Willa said and meant it. It was a long time ago. But she could see the old grief still there in his eyes. What about you? What was your life like in Philadelphia? She hesitated, not sure how much to tell him. But something about the quiet of the house, the way he listened without judging, made her want to be honest. My mother died when I was 15. She had been the one who held our family together, who managed the household and kept my father on track. After she was gone, he fell apart. He lost his business, started gambling and drinking. We moved from a nice house to a boarding house in a rough neighborhood. I tried to find work washing clothes, sewing, whatever I could, but it was never enough. He kept gambling, kept losing, kept falling deeper into debt. When he told me he was going to find me a husband out west, I thought he was joking. But then the letter came, and she stopped, her throat tight. Victor reached across the table and covered her hand with his. His palm was warm and rough with calluses. You did not deserve that. No one deserves that. She looked down at his hand on hers, at the scars on his knuckles, the dirt permanently ground into the creases of his skin. It was the hand of someone who worked hard, who built things instead of destroying them. Why are you being so kind to me? Because you are here, and you deserve kindness. He squeezed her hand gently, then let go. And because I know what it is like to feel alone. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed with the sound of crickets drifting through the open window, Willa tried to imagine what her life might become. She thought about Victor sleeping in the barn, about his declaration that she belonged to no one, about the way his hand had felt on hers. She thought about the endless prairie and the big sky and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she could build something new here. The next morning, she woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the smell of coffee. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Victor at the stove, frying eggs and bacon. He looked up when she entered, his hair still damp from washing. "Good morning. I hope I did not wake you." "No, I was already awake." She moved to pour herself coffee, feeling strange in this domestic scene, like they were playing house, pretending to be a married couple when they were still essentially strangers. "You did not have to make breakfast. I was making it anyway. Seemed silly to make you cook again after you made dinner last night." He slid eggs and bacon onto 2 plates and brought them to the table. "I thought maybe today I could show you around the property if you want, or if you would rather stay in the house, that is fine too." Willa sat down and picked up her fork. "I would like to see the ranch." His face brightened. "Good. It is a nice morning for it." After breakfast, they walked out into the sunshine. Victor showed her the barn, where his 2 wagon horses lived alongside a paint horse he said was his riding mount. He showed her the chicken coop and how to collect eggs, the small garden plot where he grew vegetables, the pasture where the cattle grazed. He explained how he rotated them to different areas to keep the grass from being overgrazed, how he checked them daily for injury or illness, how much work went into keeping even a small herd healthy. Willa found herself fascinated despite her initial intention to remain detached. There was something appealing about the straightforward logic of it all. You worked hard, and your work had visible results. You fed and cared for your animals, and they thrived. It was so different from her father's world of gambling and speculation, where money appeared and disappeared like smoke. "Could I learn?" she asked suddenly. How to help with the ranch, I mean. Victor stopped walking and turned to look at her. You would want to. I do not know what else I would do with my time. She met his gaze. If I am going to stay here even just for a while, I should be useful. You do not have to earn your keep, Willa. I told you. I know what you told me, she interrupted. But I want to help anyway. I want to learn. He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right. We can start with the chickens and the garden. Once you are comfortable with that, I can teach you more. Over the following days, they fell into a rhythm. Victor was patient as he showed her how to care for the chickens, how to water and weed the garden, how to milk the cow he kept for fresh butter and cream. She proved to be a quick learner, and she could see him trying not to look pleased when she managed tasks on her first try. In the evenings, they cooked dinner together and talked about his childhood on the ranch, about her memories of her mother, about books they had read and places they hoped to see someday. He slept in the barn, true to his word, though she sometimes caught him looking at the house with something like longing in his eyes. Samuel Potter, the ranch hand, arrived on the fourth day. He was a grizzled man with a gray beard and sharp eyes that took in everything. When Victor introduced Willa, Samuel shook her hand with surprising gentleness. So you are the young lady from back east, he said. Heard about you from the gossips in town. They are saying all sorts of things. Samuel, Victor said warningly. What? The old man looked innocent. I am just telling her what I heard. Better she knows what people are saying than be surprised by it. What are they saying? Willa asked, though she thought she could guess. Oh, that Victor here bought himself a bride like a mail-order catalog. That you must be desperate or ugly or both to agree to such a thing. That it is a scandal and probably immoral. Samuel spat on the ground. Load of nonsense, if you ask me. People got nothing better to do than stick their noses in other folks' business. No one asked you, Victor muttered, his ears turning red, but Willa surprised herself by laughing. Thank you for the warning, Samuel. I appreciate your honesty. The old man grinned. I like her, Victor. She has spine. As the days turned into weeks, Willa felt herself slowly relaxing into this new life. The work was hard and the days were long, but there was something satisfying about it. She liked the feel of the sun on her face and the wind in her hair. She liked the chickens, even though they were silly creatures, and she loved the garden. She had never grown anything before, and watching the plants thrive under her care gave her a sense of accomplishment she had not felt in years. And then there was Victor. She found herself noticing small things about him, the way he always made sure she had enough to eat before serving himself. The way he fixed the loose step on the porch without being asked, because he knew she had tripped on it once. The way he talked to the animals with the same patient kindness he showed her. He worked incredibly hard, often from before sunrise to after sunset, but he never complained. And despite the obvious weariness that sometimes showed in his eyes, he always had time to answer her questions or show her how to do something new. She caught him watching her sometimes when he thought she was not looking. Not in a predatory way, but with something softer curiosity, maybe, or hope. And she found herself watching him too, her eyes drawn to the way his muscles moved under his shirt when he lifted hay bales, the way the sun caught the dark strands of his hair, the rare, brilliant smile that transformed his serious face. It confused her, these feelings. She had not expected to like Victor Kane, much less feel attracted to him. But there it was, growing stronger each day, an awareness of him that made her pulse quicken when he stood close, that made her disappointed when he headed to the barn each night instead of staying in the house. One evening, about a month after her arrival, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was streaked with orange and pink, and the air had finally cooled from the heat of the day. Victor had his boots off, his feet stretched out in front of him, and he looked more relaxed than she had ever seen him. "Can I ask you something?" Willa said. "Of course. Why have you not married before? I mean, before sending for a bride from an agency." He was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "There was a girl when I was younger, Sarah Whitmore. We grew up together and I thought we would get married someday. But when my father died and I had to take over the ranch, everything changed. She wanted to marry someone who could give her a better life, someone who could take her to parties and buy her nice things. She married a banker from Salina instead." He shrugged. "After that, I just threw myself into the work. Years went by. I looked up one day and realized I was 25 years old and completely alone. My mother was gone by then, and I was coming home every night to an empty house. So I thought, maybe there is someone out there who wants what I want: a simple life, a partnership, someone to build something with. I went to the matrimonial agency in town and placed an advertisement, and my father answered it. Yes." He turned to look at her. "I wish you had been the one to answer it. I wish you had wanted to come here instead of being forced." Willa felt her heart skip. "I am here now." "But you are staying because you have nowhere else to go. That is different from choosing to be here." She thought about that, about the truth of his words. Was she only here because she had no other options? Or had something changed in the weeks she had spent on this ranch? She thought about how she felt when she woke up in the morning, now not with dread like she had in Philadelphia, but with anticipation for the day ahead. She thought about the satisfaction of gathering eggs and tending the garden, the beauty of the prairie at sunset, the way Victor said her name like it was something precious. "Maybe it was not my choice at first," she said slowly, "but it is my choice now. I could leave, you have told me that a dozen times, but I have not. Does that not count for something?" He studied her face, his expression unreadable in the fading light. "Does that mean you want to stay?" "Yes," she said, and realized it was true. "I want to stay." Something in his posture shifted, tension she had not realized he was carrying suddenly releasing. "I am glad," he said quietly. "I am really glad." They sat in silence after that, but it was a comfortable silence, full of unspoken understanding. When the stars began to appear, Victor reluctantly got to his feet. "I should let you get some rest. Morning comes early." Willa stood too. Before she could think better of it, she reached out and caught his hand. "Victor, you do not have to sleep in the barn anymore. The house has 2 rooms. We could, no." His voice was gentle but firm. "Thank you, but no. When I sleep under the same roof as you, I want it to be because we are truly married, because you chose me, not because it is convenient." He squeezed her hand, then let go. "Good night, Willa." She watched him walk across the yard to the barn, his figure becoming a shadow in the darkness. Her hand still tingled where he had held it. The next morning, Concordia had its weekly market day, and Victor asked if Willa wanted to come into town with him. She hesitated, remembering what Samuel had said about the gossip, but she was curious to see more of the town. She put on her better dress and pinned her blonde hair up, and they drove the wagon into Concordia together. The market was set up in the town square, farmers selling produce, women selling baked goods and preserves, merchants with tables of dry goods. Victor helped her down from the wagon and immediately offered his arm. She took it, appreciating the gesture of solidarity. People stared. She felt their eyes on her as they walked through the market, heard the whispers that followed in their wake. A few people nodded politely to Victor, but most just stared. Willa kept her chin up and tried to ignore them. They were looking at fabric at one of the merchant's stalls when a woman approached them. She was beautiful in a polished way, dark hair in an elaborate style, expensive dress, a pretty face with sharp eyes. "Victor Kane," she said, her voice saccharine sweet. "I heard you had brought a wife back from the East." Victor's arm tensed under Willa's hand. "Hello, Sarah." Yes, this is my wife, Willa. Willa, this is Sarah Whitmore. Well, Sarah Brennan now. So this was the girl who had broken his heart. Willa studied her with interest. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Brennan. Sarah's smile did not reach her eyes. How charming! A mail-order bride. That must have been quite the journey for you, Mrs. Kane. It was, Willa said evenly, but I am glad I made it. How fortunate that Victor could afford to buy a wife, Sarah continued, her tone dripping with false sympathy. I suppose when you cannot win a woman's heart honestly, you have to resort to other means. Victor's jaw tightened, and Willa felt a surge of protective anger. Before she could think better of it, she stepped closer to him, her hand tightening on his arm. Actually, Mrs. Brennan, I was the fortunate one, she said clearly. I could have ended up with any number of men who answered my father's advertisement. Instead, I found someone kind and honest and hardworking. Someone who treats me with respect and gives me freedom to choose my own path. I would say that makes me the luckiest woman in Kansas. Sarah's expression soured. How very naive. Well, best of luck to you both. You will need it. She swept away, her skirts swishing. Victor stared at Willa, his eyes wide. You did not have to do that. Yes, I did. She was surprised by how angry she felt. She had no right to speak to you that way. She has never forgiven me for not being what she wanted. He paused. What you said, did you mean it? Willa met his gaze. Every word. His face transformed with a smile so bright it took her breath away. Come on, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Let me buy you something. What do you need, Victor? You do not have to, I want to. He looked around the market with new enthusiasm. Fabric, a new dress, whatever you want. They spent the next hour browsing the stalls together, and Willa found herself laughing as Victor insisted on buying her fabric for 2 new dresses, a pretty hair ribbon, a jar of honey, and a book of poetry he noticed her looking at. He was like a different person, lighter somehow, and she realized her defense of him had meant more than she could have known. On the drive home, he was quiet but in a good way, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. When they reached the ranch, he helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. Thank you, he said softly, for what you said in town. You did not have to defend me, but thank you. I meant what I said, Victor, all of it. She looked up at him, at his storm-colored eyes and his serious face, and felt something shift inside her. I think I am falling in love with you. He went very still. What? I think I am falling in love with you, she repeated, her heart pounding. I know it has only been a few weeks, and I know this is not how either of us planned things, but I cannot help how I feel. Victor cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle. I have been in love with you since the day you told me you could carry your own bag, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Every day since then, I have fallen a little bit more. I did not say anything because I did not want to pressure you, did not want you to feel obligated. But God, Willa, I love you. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you laugh when the chickens do something stupid. I love watching you in the garden, and I love the way you scrunch up your nose when you are concentrating. I love you. She reached up to cover his hands with hers. Then why are we waiting? Why are we pretending we are not already building a life together? Because I want you to be sure. I want you to choose this with your whole heart. I am sure, she said. I choose this. I choose you. He kissed her then, soft and tentative at first, then deeper as she responded. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. Marry me, Victor said. Properly this time. Not because of a contract or because your father sold you, but because we want to, because we love each other. Yes, Willa said, laughing through sudden tears. Yes, I will marry you. They were married 2 weeks later by the preacher in Concordia, with Samuel as their witness. Willa wore a new dress she had made from the fabric Victor bought her, pale blue cotton with white lace at the collar. Victor wore his best clothes and looked nervous and happy all at once. When he slipped the simple gold ring onto her finger, his hand trembled. "I promise to love you and protect you," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "I promise to respect your choices and support your dreams. I promise to be your partner in all things for as long as I live." Willa felt tears slip down her cheeks. "I promise to love you with my whole heart. I promise to build a life with you, to work beside you, to be your safe harbor. I promise to choose you every day for the rest of my life." The preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and when Victor kissed her, Willa felt like she was finally, truly home. That night, Victor did not go to the barn. They stood together in the house, their house now, and he took her hand and led her to the bedroom. He was gentle and patient, taking his time, making sure she felt safe and cherished. And when he held her afterward, his arms wrapped around her in the darkness, Willa thought about how far she had come from that terrible morning in Philadelphia when she opened her father's letter. She had been sold like property, sent away from everything she knew, forced into a situation not of her choosing. But somehow, impossibly, it had led her here, to this man who loved her, to this land that was becoming part of her, to a future that was hers to shape. "What are you thinking about?" Victor murmured against her hair. "I am thinking that sometimes the worst things lead to the best things," she said. "I am thinking that I would not change anything because it brought me to you." He tightened his arms around her. "I love you, Willa Kane. I love you too." The first year of their marriage was not easy. There were droughts that killed half the vegetable crop, a blizzard that winter that trapped them in the house for 3 days, cattle that got sick and had to be sold at a loss. But they faced it together, working side by side, and somehow they always found a way through. Willa proved to be not just a quick learner but a true partner. She took over managing the garden and the chickens entirely, and her careful planning meant they had enough vegetables preserved to last through the winter. She learned to ride well enough to help drive cattle, and she became adept at mending fence and doctoring injured animals. Samuel said she had a natural way with livestock, and Victor glowed with pride every time the old man praised her. But more than the work, it was the life they built together that mattered. The quiet mornings drinking coffee on the porch, watching the sun come up over the prairie. The evenings reading together by lamplight, Victor in the rocking chair and Willa curled up in the other chair with her mending. The way they learned each other's rhythms and needs, the way they fit together like pieces of a puzzle neither had known was incomplete. In the spring, Willa realized she was pregnant. She told Victor one evening after dinner, nervous about how he would react. They had not talked much about children, there had been too much else to figure out first. He stared at her, his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. "Truly, truly." She watched his face, trying to read his expression. "Are you happy? Happy?" He set down his cup and crossed the room to pull her into his arms. "Willa, I am thrilled. I am terrified, but I am thrilled." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes shining. "We are going to have a baby." "We are going to have a baby," she repeated, and then they were both laughing and crying at once. The pregnancy was hard. Willa was sick for the first 3 months, barely able to keep anything down. Victor worried constantly, hovering over her until she had to gently tell him to give her some space. But as the months went on and her belly grew round with their child, they both grew excited. Victor built a cradle from wood he had been saving, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. Willa sewed tiny clothes and blankets, marveling at how small they were. Samuel brought his wife, Martha, out to the ranch to meet Willa. Martha was a stout, practical woman who had raised 7 children of her own, and she took Willa under her wing immediately. She taught her what to expect during the birth, what supplies to have ready, how to care for a newborn. Willa was grateful for the older woman's no-nonsense advice and her genuine warmth. The baby came on a cold November night. Martha was there to help, and Samuel kept Victor occupied in the barn because he was driving everyone crazy with his pacing and worrying. The labor was long and painful, and there were moments when Willa thought she could not do it, could not endure another moment. But Martha talked her through it, and when she finally heard the baby's first cry, everything else fell away. "It is a boy," Martha announced, wrapping the squalling infant in a blanket. "A healthy baby boy." Willa reached for her son with trembling hands, and when she looked down at his red, wrinkled face, she fell in love all over again. He had dark hair like Victor and a surprisingly strong grip when he wrapped his tiny fingers around hers. "Someone better go tell that father of his before he wears a hole in the barn floor," Martha said with a chuckle. Victor burst into the room moments later, his face pale with worry. "Willa, are you all right?" "I am fine." She was exhausted and sore, but she had never been happier. "Come meet your son." He approached slowly, as if afraid he might break something, and looked down at the bundle in her arms. His expression went soft with wonder. "He is perfect," he whispered. "He is absolutely perfect." He looked at Willa, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you. Thank you for giving me this, for giving me a family." They named him William Victor Kane, after Willa's mother and his father. Little William proved to be a healthy, hungry baby who kept them busy around the clock. Victor was a devoted father, getting up in the middle of the night to change diapers and walk William when he was fussy, singing off key lullabies that somehow always worked. Willa watched him with their son and felt her heart expand with love she had not known she was capable of feeling. The ranch continued to grow. With Willa's careful management and Victor's hard work, they were able to expand the herd and improve the property. They built a new chicken coop and added a smokehouse. Victor planted an orchard apple and cherry trees that would not bear fruit for years, but he said he liked thinking about the future, about their children eating apples from trees he had planted. When William was 2 years old, Willa became pregnant again. This time, she knew what to expect, and the pregnancy was easier. Their daughter was born on a warm spring evening with much less drama than her brother's arrival. They named her Rose Marie, and she had her mother's blonde hair and her father's gray eyes. Life fell into a comfortable pattern. The children grew, the ranch prospered, and Victor and Willa grew deeper in love with each passing year. There were hard times, a terrible drought one summer, a winter when Victor broke his arm and could not work for weeks. The year scarlet fever swept through the area, and they quarantined themselves on the ranch for months, terrified for their children. But they weathered it all together. One evening, when William was 8 and Rose was 6, they were all sitting on the porch after dinner. The children were playing with the new puppy Samuel had given them, and Victor had his arm around Willa's shoulders. She leaned into his warmth, watching their children laugh in the golden evening light. "What are you thinking about?" Victor asked, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I am thinking about the day I arrived here," Willa said. "How scared I was, how angry, how I thought my life was over. And now I think that was the day my life really began." She turned to look up at him. "I was a mail-order bride sold by my own father, shipped west like cargo. But you said I belonged to no one. You gave me back my freedom, and I chose to give it to you. That made all the difference." Victor cupped her face in his hand, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "I did not save you, Willa. You saved yourself. I just got lucky enough to be there when you needed a place to land." "We saved each other," she corrected. "Two lonely people who found each other by accident and built something beautiful." "Not by accident," he said. "Maybe it was meant to be. Maybe you were always supposed to end up here with me." "Maybe," she agreed and kissed him softly. William came running up onto the porch then, the puppy in his arms. "Mama, Papa, look how high Biscuit can jump." They watched as he set the puppy down, and it proceeded to jump exactly 2 inches off the ground, its stubby tail wagging frantically. Rose clapped her hands in delight. "Very impressive," Victor said solemnly, and Willa bit back a laugh as the sun set over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Willa looked around at her family, her husband, her children, the ranch they had built together, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. She thought about her father sometimes, wondered if he was still alive, if he ever thought about what had become of the daughter he sold. She had forgiven him, or at least she was trying to. His actions, as terrible as they were, had inadvertently given her the greatest gift of her life. Years passed. William grew into a strong, serious young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Rose became a spirited girl with a gift for healing animals and a determination to become a veterinarian, much to the shock of their conservative neighbors. Victor's hair started to gray at the temples, and Willa found laugh lines creasing the corners of her eyes. But their love remained constant, a steady flame that warmed them through all the seasons of their life. When Willa was 35, they had another child, a surprise baby they named Margaret Ann. She was a happy accident, as Victor called her, and they doted on her shamelessly. William and Rose adored their little sister, and the house was full of laughter and chaos and love. One autumn evening, when Margaret was 3 and the older children were nearly grown, Victor and Willa stood together in the pasture, watching the sunset. It had become their ritual over the years, this quiet time together at the end of the day, just the two of them. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" Willa asked. "In the wagon on the way to the ranch. I said a lot of things that day, most of them probably stupid." She elbowed him gently. "You said I belonged to no one, that I was free to choose my own path." "I remember." He pulled her closer against his side. "Do you regret your choice? Ever wish you had taken me up on my offer and left?" "Not for a single second," she said firmly. "This life, this family, you are everything I never knew I wanted. You gave me freedom, and I used it to choose love. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." Victor turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to frame her face the way he had done 1,000 times before. "You are the greatest gift I have ever received. When you stepped off that train, so scared and angry and determined not to show it, I knew my life was going to change. I just did not realize how completely. You have given me everything, Willa. Love, a family, a reason to wake up smiling every morning. I would go through it all again, the drought, the hard times, all of it just to have you by my side. Even Sarah Brennan at the market," Willa teased. He groaned. "Especially Sarah Brennan at the market. Watching you put her in her place was one of the proudest moments of my life." They laughed together, and then he kissed her as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the prairie in shades of purple and gold. Behind them, they could hear Margaret singing to herself in the house, William hammering something in the barn, Rose calling the chickens in for the night. The sounds of their life, their family, their home. Later that night, after the children were in bed, Willa sat at the kitchen table with her mother's Bible open in front of her. She had started writing in the margins years ago dates of important events, little notes about the children, prayers of thanksgiving. Now she picked up her pen and wrote, 20 years ago today, I arrived in Concordia, Kansas, a mail-order bride sold by my father. I thought my life was ending. Instead, I found Victor and my life truly began. I have been blessed beyond measure." Victor came up behind her and read over her shoulder. 20 years, he said wonderingly. "Has it really been that long?" 20 years, she confirmed. William is grown. Rose is studying to be a veterinarian against all odds, and Margaret is already showing signs of being the most stubborn of all our children." "She gets that from you," Victor said, bending to kiss the top of her head. "She gets it from both of us," Willa corrected. Stubborn people who refuse to accept that a mail-order bride arrangement had to be a transaction instead of a love story. "Best decision I ever made, telling you that you belong to no one," Victor said. "Because it meant that when you chose me, I knew it was real." Willa closed the Bible and stood, turning to wrap her arms around her husband. He held her close, and she breathed in the familiar scent of him, hay and soap and sun-warmed skin. After 20 years, he still made her heart race. "I love you," she said. "More today than yesterday, more tomorrow than today." "I love you too," he replied. "Forever and always." And that, Willa thought as she held onto the man who had saved her by setting her free, was the real story. Not the part where she was bought and sold like property. Not the part where she traveled west in fear and anger. The real story was what came after the choice to stay, the decision to love, the life they built together through hard work and devotion, and an endless commitment to each other. She had been a mail-order bride sold by her own father, but Victor Kane had looked at her and said, "You belong to no one now." In giving her freedom, he had won her heart, and in choosing to stay, she had found not just a home, but a place to belong that was entirely her own making. Years continued to unfold like the endless prairie that surrounded their ranch. William married a girl from town named Catherine, and they built a house on the far side of the property. He took over more and more of the ranch work as Victor got older, though Victor never fully retired. He would be working cattle until the day he died, he said, and no one doubted him. Rose did become a veterinarian, one of the first women in Kansas to achieve it. She practiced in Concordia, but came home often to help with the ranch animals, and to sit on the porch with her parents, telling them about her work. She never married, saying she was too busy and too happy with her life to bother, though Willa suspected there was more to the story than her daughter let on. Margaret grew up wild and free, riding across the prairie like she owned it. She had her father's love of the land and her mother's fierce independence. When she was 16, she announced she wanted to be a rancher herself, and Willa and Victor looked at each other and smiled. Of course she did. On their 30th anniversary, Victor took Willa back to the train station where they had first met. They stood on the platform, older now but still holding hands like newlyweds. "I was so scared that day," Willa said, looking at the spot where she had stood all those years ago. "I did not know what kind of man would be waiting for me. I had imagined every terrible possibility. And instead you got me," Victor said with a smile. "Probably still a disappointment." "The best disappointment of my life," she teased, then sobered. "No, that is not true. You were the best surprise of my life. You were kind when you could have been cruel. You were respectful when you could have demanded obedience. You gave me choices when you could have taken them away. You are the best man I have ever known, Victor Kane." He pulled her into his arms right there on the platform, not caring who saw. "And you are the bravest woman I have ever known. You took a terrible situation and turned it into something beautiful. You made this ranch a home. You raised incredible children. You built a life that matters. I am in awe of you, Willa. Every single day, I am in awe of you." They kissed there on the platform, two people who had found each other through the most unlikely of circumstances and built a love that had lasted 3 decades and would last until their final breaths. As they walked back to the wagon, Willa thought about the girl she had been when she arrived in Kansas 20 years old, angry, scared, feeling like her life was over. If she could go back and tell that girl anything, what would she say? Maybe just this: "Hold on. It gets better. You will meet a man who sees you as a person, not property. You will fall in love in a way that transforms you. You will build a family and a home. You will find strength you did not know you had. You will discover that sometimes the worst things that happen to us crack us open in exactly the right ways, allowing light to flood in. You will be happy. So incredibly, unexpectedly happy. The ranch prospered under William's management, with Victor still there to advise and help when needed. They added more cattle, more land, and William's children, Victor and Willa's grandchildren, ran through the house and barns just as their parents had before them. The cycle continued, life renewing itself generation after generation. Willa often sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the prairie, and felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. She thought sometimes about her father, about what had become of him. She had gotten word, years ago, that he had died drunk, alone, buried in a pauper's grave. She had cried, not for the man he became, but for the father he had been when she was young, before grief and addiction destroyed him. She forgave him, truly forgave him, because his terrible decision had brought her to Victor. It did not excuse what he did, but she could acknowledge that something good had come from something bad. That was life, she thought, complex and messy and full of unexpected grace. As Victor and Willa grew older, they slowed down but never stopped. He still checked on the cattle every day, still fixed fences and mended things around the ranch. She still tended her garden, though it was smaller now, and she spent more time with her grandchildren, telling them stories about the old days. One summer evening, when Willa was 63 and Victor was 68, they sat together on the porch as they had done thousands of times before. Their hands were wrinkled and spotted with age, but they still fit together perfectly. The prairie stretched before them, golden in the evening light, unchanged and eternal. "You know what I love about this land," Victor said, his voice soft. "It does not care who we were before we came here. It does not care about our mistakes or our past. It just asks us to show up every day and do the work, and if we do, it gives back generously. Like us," Willa said. "We did not care who the other was supposed to be. We just showed up every day and did the work of loving each other." He squeezed her hand. "Best work I ever did." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Behind them, they could hear their family, children and grandchildren, all together for Sunday dinner. The sound of laughter and conversation drifted out through the open windows, the sound of a life well lived. "If you could go back," Victor said suddenly, "knowing everything you know now, would you still get on that train? Would you still come to Kansas?" Willa did not hesitate. "In a heartbeat." "Every hardship, every struggle, every moment of fear, I would do it all again to have this life, this family, this love. Even though you were sold like property, even though you had no choice, especially because of that," she said firmly, "because you gave me back my choice. You looked at me and said I belonged to no one, and that simple statement changed my entire life. You taught me that I had value beyond what someone paid for me, that I deserved respect and freedom and love. And once I learned that, once I really believed it, I was able to choose you. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to." Victor's eyes were bright with tears. "I chose you too, you know. That day on the train platform, when I saw how scared and angry you were, but also how determined not to show it, I chose you, and I have kept choosing you every day since." "We chose each other," Willa said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "And that made all the difference." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, their family came out onto the porch. William and Catherine, their 3 children ranging from 15 to 22. Rose, still unmarried and still unapologetic about it. Margaret, now married herself to a rancher from a neighboring county, pregnant with her first child. And all the grandchildren, from babies to young adults, carrying on the legacy Victor and Willa had built. "Papa, tell us the story," one of the younger grandchildren said, climbing onto Victor's lap despite being almost too big for it. "Tell us how you and Grandma met." Victor looked at Willa, and she saw the question in his eyes. They had told sanitized versions of the story before, leaving out the parts about her being sold, focusing instead on the mail-order bride advertisement and the journey west. But their grandchildren were old enough now to hear the truth. "Your grandmother and I met because her father made a terrible choice," Victor began, his voice steady and clear. "He sold her to me like she was property, not a person. She came to Kansas angry and scared, with every right to hate me for being part of that transaction." The family had gone quiet, listening. Willa picked up the story. "But your grandfather surprised me. On that first day, as we drove to the ranch, he told me something I have never forgotten. He said, 'You belong to no one now, not to your father and not to me.' He gave me my freedom back. And because he did that, because he treated me like a person who deserved respect and choices, I was able to fall in love with him. Not because I was forced to, but because I wanted to." "That is the most important lesson we can teach you," Victor said, looking around at all the faces of his family. "Every person deserves respect. Every person deserves choices. Love that is forced is not love at all. Love that is freely given, that is chosen every day, that is the kind of love that lasts." "We have had 43 years together," Willa added. 43 years of choosing each other, working together, building this life. And it all started because your grandfather understood something simple but profound, that real love can only exist in freedom." The grandchildren asked questions, and Victor and Willa answered them honestly. They talked about the hard parts and the good parts, about how love was not always easy, but was always worth the effort. They talked about respect and partnership, and the importance of seeing each other as equals. As the evening grew late and the family began to head home or to bed, Victor and Willa were left alone on the porch once more. The air had cooled, and Willa shivered slightly. Victor immediately got up to get her a blanket, draping it around her shoulders and tucking it in carefully. Even after all these years, he still took care of her in small, constant ways. "Thank you," she said, "not just for the blanket, but for everything, for 43 years of devotion, for the family they had built, for loving her so completely." "Always," he replied and kissed the top of her head. They stayed there long into the night, watching the stars wheel overhead, holding hands like they had done on their first evening together on this porch so many years ago. Two people who had found each other in the most unlikely way and had built something lasting and true. Willa thought about the letter that had arrived on that Tuesday morning in 1873, about reading her father's words and feeling like her life was ending. She thought about the train journey west, about stepping onto the platform in Concordia and seeing Victor for the first time. She thought about all the moments that had followed the first time he smiled at her, the first time she realized she was falling in love, the day they truly married, the births of their children, the quiet accumulation of years spent side by side. It had not been the life she imagined for herself when she was young. It had been better, richer, fuller, more beautiful than anything she could have dreamed. "What are you thinking about?" Victor asked, his voice rumbling in the darkness. "I am thinking that I was a mail-order bride sold by my own father," Willa said, "and that you told me I belonged to no one. And that simple act of kindness, of seeing me as a person deserving of freedom and choice, gave me everything. It gave me you, gave me this family, gave me a life I love beyond measure." "You gave me everything too," Victor said. "You took a lonely man and gave him a reason to live. You made this ranch a home. You gave me children and grandchildren and a love story I still cannot quite believe is real." "It is real," Willa assured him. "Every beautiful moment of it is real." They sat together in the darkness, wrapped in blankets and love and 43 years of shared history. And Willa knew with absolute certainty that if she could live her life over, she would not change a single thing. Every hardship had led her here, to this man, to this place, to this profound happiness. She had belonged to no one, and so she had been free to choose everything, and she had chosen well. The years continued their steady march. Victor and Willa celebrated their 50th anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The ranch was thriving under William's management, and the family name was well respected throughout the county. They had built something that would outlast them, a legacy of love and hard work and respect. When Willa was 71, Victor became ill. It started as a cough that would not go away, then progressed to weakness and fatigue. The doctor said his heart was giving out, that there was nothing to be done but keep him comfortable. Victor accepted the news with characteristic calm, only asking that he be allowed to stay at the ranch instead of going to a hospital. "I want to die in my own bed in the house where I was born," he said, "with my wife beside me." Willa nursed him through those final months with the same devotion he had shown her for 50 years. She read to him, talked to him about their life together, held his hand through the bad nights. The family came often, saying their goodbyes, telling him how much he meant to them. William thanked him for teaching him how to be a good man. Rose told him he was the reason she believed she could do anything. Margaret said she had never doubted for a moment that she was loved and valued because of how he treated her mother. On a quiet spring morning, with Willa lying beside him in their bed and the prairie wind blowing through the open window, Victor took his last breath. His eyes found Willa's, and he smiled that brilliant, transforming smile she had fallen in love with so many years ago. "I choose you," he whispered. "Every time in every lifetime I choose you. And I choose you," she replied through her tears, "always and forever." He closed his eyes and was gone, slipping away as peacefully as falling asleep. Willa held him for a long time after, memorizing the feel of him one last time, saying all the things she had never quite said enough. "Thank you, I love you. You made my life beautiful." They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch with a simple stone that read, "Victor Kane, 1848–1924. Beloved husband, father, grandfather, he taught us that true love exists in freedom." Willa grieved deeply, as was right and proper for a love that had spanned 51 years. But she did not fall apart. Victor had taught her she was strong, and she proved it now. She stayed on the ranch, helping William where she could, spoiling her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, tending her small garden. She visited Victor's grave often, talking to him about their family, about the ranch, about how much she missed him. At night, alone in their bed, she would look at the photograph taken on their 25th anniversary, both of them smiling, Victor's arm around her shoulders, looking at each other like nothing else in the world existed. She would trace his face with her finger and remember everything, every laugh, every kiss, every quiet moment on the porch watching the sunset. "I had a good life," she would say to him across the distance death had created. "Because of you, I had an extraordinary life." Willa lived another 8 years, long enough to see Margaret's children grow, to watch the ranch continue to prosper, to know that what she and Victor had built would endure. She stayed sharp and engaged until the very end, still offering advice, still tending her garden, still watching the prairie sunsets from the porch where she and Victor had spent so many evenings. On a warm summer evening, sitting in her rocking chair with her family around her, Willa closed her eyes and did not open them again. She died peacefully, a small smile on her face, and those who found her said it looked like she was dreaming of something wonderful. They buried her beside Victor with a stone that read, Willa Langford Kane, 1853–1932. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she taught us that we are defined not by what happens to us, but by the choices we make. And if anyone had asked the family about Victor and Willa Kane, about what made their love story special, they would have told the truth that it started with a terrible transaction, but became something beautiful because two people chose respect over ownership, partnership over domination, freedom over control. They would have said that Victor Kane looked at a woman who had been sold like property and told her she belonged to no one, giving her back her dignity and her choices. And Willa Langford had taken that gift of freedom and used it to choose love. They built a life together on the Kansas prairie, raised children and grandchildren, created a legacy that lasted generations. And through it all, they kept choosing each other not because they had to, but because they wanted to. That, more than anything else, was what made their story worth telling. Years later, one of Willa's great-great-granddaughters would stand on that same porch, looking out over the ranch that still bore the Kane name, and think about the woman who had started it all. She would read Willa's notes in the margins of the old Bible, see the words written in fading ink. I was a mail-order bride sold by my own father, but I belonged to no one, and so I was free to choose everything. And she would understand that sometimes our greatest blessings come wrapped in terrible circumstances, that the worst moments of our lives can crack us open in exactly the right ways, letting light flood in. She would understand that love, real love, requires freedom, that you cannot own another person's heart, but you can earn their trust, their respect, their devotion. Most of all, she would understand that we are not defined by what happens to us, but by how we respond. Willa Langford had been sold by her father, sent west like cargo, forced into a situation not of her choosing. But she had taken that terrible beginning and transformed it into something beautiful. She had chosen to stay, chosen to love, chosen to build a life that mattered. And in doing so, she had created a legacy that would endure long after she was gone. The ranch still stood, a testament to hard work and partnership. The family still thrived, carrying forward the values Victor and Willa had instilled. And somewhere, in the whisper of prairie wind and the golden light of sunset, their love story lived on a reminder that freedom and choice are the foundations of real love, that kindness can transform lives, and that sometimes the most unlikely beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings.